Well, I was going to be introducing at this point Peggy Reeves. However, Peggy broke her arm. So instead, I'm going to be Peggy Reeves this morning. I want to know how many of you know Peggy Reeves. Raise your hand. Look at that. Peggy Reeves was a Colorado senator, Colorado representative. She was mayor pro tem in Fort Collins. She was on the city council. And she was the first woman on the City of Fort Collins Water Board. And that means a lot to me because I was the second woman on the City of Fort Collins Water Board in the early 80s. Well, Peggy wrote out for me what she was going to say. So I will now be Peggy. Good morning. The edited film that you will be seeing, The Lower Poudre, A Time for Action, was developed in 1970. First, a little background. I, Peggy, am a member of AAUW, the American Association of University Women, and we had a study topic called This Beleaguered Earth, Can Man Survive? Sounds kind of 60s, doesn't it? This was the beginning of the environmental movement, and the celebration of the first Earth Day was in 1970. After discussing many areas of environmental concern, we chose the Poudre River as our project, contrasting the beauty and the recreational opportunities of the Poudre up the canyon, fishing, hiking, camping, kayaking, to the complete neglect and degradation of the river as it flowed through downtown Fort Collins. Our goal was to educate and build support for the cleanup of the river and a green belt with trails along its banks. AAUW formed a partnership with CSU School of Technical Journalism. We had the message and we provided the script. The CSU students, with help from faculty, provided the documentary film. So now we're going to see about 5 minutes of what was about a 15-minute film.
This is the Poudre River, the upper Poudre, which most people know. Rushing down the eastern slope of the Rockies, it offers the kind of scenery and fishing that attracts thousands of people yearly. During the summer season, it's increasingly difficult to find space for all the campers, hikers, fishermen, and just daydreamers who come here. Ask just about anyone to describe this river. He'll tell you of the clean air, beautiful forests, and splashing waters that most people associate with the Poudre. Those who know the river intimately are familiar too with the Poudre's change of moods as the seasons change, from calm and placid in winter to boisterous and full of life in spring, as water from the melting snow begins its headlong rush to the plains. This too is the Poudre, the lower Poudre. As it enters LaPorte and Fort Collins, the river undergoes an abrupt change in character. Here the river is ignored, unattended, and abused. Few people are lured to these banks. The Cachel of Poudre, French for hide the powder, is the river's real name, a christening given it in the mid-1800s when trappers and miners worked the area, collecting the furs and minerals that are so much a part of Colorado's early history. Beginning high in the mountains west of Fort Collins, it comes down through the Roosevelt National Forest, through the valleys and canyons, past diversion structures, and finally into LaPorte and Fort Collins. This then is the other face of the Poudre, the lower Poudre. Along its entire length, the lower Poudre shows symptoms of neglect, decay, and inefficient use. The transition begins near LaPorte and becomes more apparent as the river winds east. Now the condition of the lower Poudre is taking on new dimensions. Increasing recreational use along the upper Poudre creates the need to look at the recreational potential downstream. As population swells along the Front Range in the next few years, the Poudre will receive more pressure. Currently, the potential of the lower Poudre is overshadowed by its abuse. Concentrations of algae and bacteria pollute the river and destroy some forms of life. Given the chance to renew itself, this part of the river could remain a cool green refuge from the urban Front Range growth of tomorrow. How does a heavily used river renew itself? Either through man's intervention or through its sensitive influence on the river's future. Unfortunately, there's little evidence of man's sensitive influence. Car bodies are cheap and efficient erosion control, for example, but they're also ugly and a possible breeding place for rodents. There are better alternatives to achieve the kind of positive influence that will be necessary to develop the lower Poudre. The tree dump north of College Avenue and the old city dump just south of the light plant already belong to the city and could be developed as recreation areas. Other spots along the Poudre would be donated or could be purchased for public use and then developed to give aesthetic and recreational pleasure. The lower Poudre River could become a focal point of this rapidly growing community. It's a time for action.
So that was 50 years ago. It's so hard to believe that we put up with having the Poudre in that horrible shape right here in our own community. I would like to think that we wouldn't let that happen today. AAUW members showed the film to countless civic groups and service clubs, lugging a reel-to-reel projector all around the community. You can see Peggy doing that. We've come a long way since then. There were no trails, no open spaces along the river or anywhere else in Fort Collins. By the end of 1980, we celebrated having 3.5 miles of trail and the beginning of the revival of the lower Poudre. Thank you, Peggy. And I want to tell you about an opportunity for some of you who may want to volunteer as a Cache la Poudre National Heritage Area Culturalist. The Poudre Heritage Alliance is our key sponsor. For the second year in a row, they've given a major gift to make the Poudre River Forum happen. And I promised I would help them plug this program that they have, where you can train to become a heritage culturalist, and you attend 3 days of training by local authors and historians, and then you are certified as an expert on the Poudre, and then you give programs and tours along the Poudre, some of them on bicycles along the Poudre Trail. So be sure and visit the Poudre Heritage Alliance booth so that you can pick up an application. The workshop is in April. I think the application deadline is probably later this month.
Hey, what'd you think about that video? 1970, I remember 1970, but boy, that seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? I mean, pretty amazing just the way they put that together. What I thought was really interesting about what they were doing there in 1970 is you had a group of people who were committed to making their community a better place, and they did it, right? I mean, they saw a need and they went after it and they did it. And I think that's really cool to be able to mark that time and to look forward to today.